Do I just need this or that one? Both? Thank you very much, Sarah. That's awesome. First thing, because we all have to do everything on social media. That's good, that'll do. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me as your first ever speaker. I guess, in one respect, the bar's quite low. My first fuck up, I noticed, was wearing the world's thickest material for my shorts on what has been the hottest January of all time. Yeah, I'm Mike. Today I want to talk to you essentially about listening to your gut. So this was a massive problem that I had listening to my own process. Just before we start, quick sort of scan of the room. Has anyone ever kind of had a gut feeling about a customer or a project? You think, this is something's wrong with this, it's not going to go well, and then turns out it hasn't gone well, it has been an absolute disaster. Hands up, anyone's ever had that? Good, all right, this story is essentially about that ended up in me being taken to court. So this was a real fucking, I should have really listened to my gut. And I can swear on this because it's called Fuck Up Night, which is awesome. This is also a bit of a talk about what I should have stuck to my process and the kind of feeling of isolation and loneliness you have when you do make a mistake and you have a real problem with, you think, well, I should have stuck to that, I should have stuck to what I know, massive disaster, but I'm here standing today, so it can't have been that bad, right? So part of the problem with this is we're constantly challenged, especially like a lot of people here run their own business or obviously are employed at least by a business. But I know that from running my own business, one of the biggest problems that I had was being challenged by people who are, I consider, more experienced than me. And one of the starting points was the business that I was working with as a client. They were a lot older than me, they were a lot bigger than me. I had a process, sure, and I was really eager to take the work on, but they kind of took over and insisted that they do it their way. And I think we have a bit of a problem with mistaking stubbornness for experience. And this is kind of a big trajectory that we're going to go on this kind of 6-minute talk, and especially how much of a massive problem this ended up being for my business and also for my mental health. We're going to get a little bit kind of dark and dingy with this in the middle bit, and then hopefully, time allowing, we'll bring it back out again. I think there's a huge misconception that customers know what they want, and this was the biggest problem that I faced. I assumed that my customer that I was going to work with knew what they wanted to work on. They thought what type of results they wanted. And this misconception is really common, especially at the time I was kind of running like a really small little like digital marketing agency. There was only a couple of us in there. So we assumed that the customer we assumed that they knew what they wanted. And this was the kind of the start of the fuck up process. And now I assume, now we have this kind of process, and we have a series of processes which essentially prevent fucking up further. But this is a really, really common misconception. And this was kind of the start of that trajectory. Really quick bit about me, as Sarah very kindly mentioned, thank you. My name is Mike Killen. I run a company called Sell Your Service. We're a sales training organization that basically helps businesses sell more of their products. I've written a book called From Single to Scale. I'm not going to hang around too much on this one, to be honest. So here's the setup. We ran a little digital marketing agency. This was when it was Devon Digital Design. There was a few of us in the business, and we were employed by a friend of mine to basically do a website for an ecological surveillance company. They're relatively local. We'll get into that in a bit. And it was a kind of a balance between, I really needed the money, and I don't know if anyone has ever had that kind of balance between, I'm not sure if I want to work with this customer, but I also need the work. So you kind of lean a little bit into, well, I'm going to take this on, even though I know it's not going to be perfect, but I figured they're going to follow my process. I had a process at the time for delivering work. And throughout this process, there were a few little kind of warning signs where I thought, I don't know if this is going to go particularly well. One of the biggest problems I noticed was that being through a referral, I figured if I treat the customer badly, if I reject the customer, I'm kind of rejecting my friend, and it made it feel a little bit awkward. In hindsight, I shouldn't have worried about that too much because they caused me a great deal of stress, but it was basically a pretty simple website project. I think at the time we were only charging a few grand for it. Now, of course, we're charging tens of thousands of pounds for our websites, but again, you're starting out, you're relatively nervous, you're relatively new, and because you're new to the game, you have a lack of confidence, which means that you rely more on that previous myth that we talked about where customers either know what they want or you mistake stubbornness for experience. So these were some of the warning signs. Ultimately, they were really difficult to work with, incredibly difficult. We had a budget process, they didn't want to go through the budget process. We had a design process, they didn't want to go through the design process. We had a content process, they didn't want to go through the content process. And every single one of these warning signs should have told me, you need to not work with this customer. But I kept saying, no, well, I need the money. It came through a referral. So there's a lot of conflicting emotions. How it ended up was we sent them a load of designs, and the designs were so abhorrent to them that it was as if I'd given them like just a manuscript smeared with shit. And it was so abhorrent. We had a professional designer who's gone on to do some incredible things, and they basically said they wanted a full refund. And this is the first big fuck up. If they asked for a refund, I should have just given it to them. I should have said, yeah, absolutely, take your refund, lose my number, don't ever call me again. But I didn't. I wanted to fight it, and that's where things started going wrong. Because I wanted to fight it, they started creating a few like legal letters and started sending me things to do with, well, we're going to take you to court if we don't take you to, if you don't refund the money. And the amount just kept stacking up because I kept saying, no, well, it's not. They haven't gone through my process. They haven't gone through my due diligence. They haven't, they've signed a contract. And in hindsight, I would have simply said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. When you're starting out a business and someone wants to take you to a court for 20 grand, now, yeah, that's a lot of money. Back then, that's an impossible amount of money. And you feel incredibly isolated. And I think this is one of the problems with fucking up in business, particularly when you run your own business, is it can feel like you're the only person in the world who's gone through that. And the reality is you're not. Now, if I get legal letters through, which we do occasionally, we do a lot of work with American clients to do with content. I'm constantly getting cease and desist letters through, stuff like YouTube content. Fine, add it to the pile. But back then, it's a massive, massive deal. And the biggest feeling I remember having was a feeling of isolation. Ultimately, this is a picture of me, literally as I was about to walk into court. I think it's maybe the second time I've ever worn a suit. But it was it's an absolutely terrifying experience. The biggest takeaway that I got from this is now, if you don't stick to my process, that's your problem, not my problem. And now, because of the fuck up, we've actually had ourselves kind of much stronger. We've ended up working with much greater clients. So the biggest takeaway, yeah, for me was, there we go. Ultimately, if you don't fit in with me, that's your problem. We don't mistake stubbornness for experience anymore. I don't think that if a customer is unhappy or they have an objection, that's my fault. It's not. It's actually them. We've done this a lot of times for a lot of clients now. It's actually their problem if they don't fit in with it. And I guess at the point, it was all about trying to fit in with their process because I mistook their experience, their age and their size and the maturity of their business for experience, when in reality, they didn't have anything much more to offer. Thank you very much for listening. That was a really quick talk, so I hope that was okay. Was that all right for time?
It's great.
Yeah, bang on. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys. Thanks for listening.